So we are in the 11th season, I think, of Speechy Side Up, which is so wild. And this is year 2026. We have Elise Mitchell back. So excited to have her back. I was just saying, I get really pumped every time we have a conversation. And today we're going to be talking about from burned out to re-energize, finding purpose through school contracting as an SLP. Elise, thank you so much for coming back on.
Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure.
So here are our learning outcomes for today. By the end of this Podcourse, we hope that you'll be able to identify at least 2 key factors contributing to burnout among school-based SLPs and describe how school contracting differs from traditional district employment models. Describe 2 ways school contracting can support clinician autonomy, flexibility, and renewed connection to core professional values. Define 2 characteristics of using school contracting as a strategic side gig within a private practice rather than as an added workload. And finally, identify 2 realistic first steps for SLPs who feel professionally stuck and are exploring school contracting as a potential career option. Here's our agenda for today. So we're starting off with introductions and backgrounds. Then we'll talk about understanding SLP burnout and what the research says, how contracting can help to alleviate that, how to add value to your private practice, small or large, with school contracting, and realistic first steps to school contracting. And then we'll wrap up with some references and closing remarks. All right, Lise, do you want to go first?
Yeah. So my name's Elise Mitchell, and I am a speech language pathologist and school contracting consultant. My experience has been, well, I started my contracting journey actually working with an agency, and I was on the executive level for a pretty large staffing agency. And then I've spent the last few years, 5 years, 6 years, 6 years. I spent the last 6 years consulting providers and provider-run businesses on all things school contracting. I am the host of Beyond the Big Agencies podcast, which started last year, and it discusses really stepping outside that traditional agency framework when it comes to school contracting and considering business run alternatives or provider run alternatives. And then I am, of course, the founder of the Therapist Support Network. I support SLPs, OTs, and PTs in building sustainable school-based work through direct contracting. I coach clinicians to diversify or replace income without relying on those investor-run agencies or even those that don't want to own kind of that traditional private practice model, how to implement the business of their dreams without maybe having summer work, for example. And then I am an advocate on ethical growth, strategic pricing, compliant contracts, and clinician autonomy. So not just talking about this as a revenue stream, but really determining how it fits your life, if it fits your life, and how to do this in a compliant, in a very different way than what is going on in our industry right now by investor-run agencies. So that is me.
I love that. This is the time of the year, I feel like, where you start getting a lot of the text messages and the calls from the agencies. And it's just like, how did you get my number? It's so
Yeah.
annoying.
I know I get the calls and I'm like, you need
You're like,
to,
I'm advocating against you.
I'm like, you really should look at people before you call them because I'm going to make a reel about this now.
That's so funny. And they just keep popping up. Like the old agencies, what was it, like EBS or something? I
Mhm.
don't get those anymore, but it's always something new.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm Venita Litvack if you are here for Elise, and I've been an SLP since 2014. I'm the host of the Speechy Side Up podcast, which is part of the Tassel Learning Network. I am the CE consultant for Tassel, and I help support course development for professionals. I'm also an owner of a private practice specializing in early intervention, AAC, and autism. I'm also a doctoral student at Northwestern University, and you will see our I guess, my newfound appreciation for high quality research embedded throughout this pod course and this season. So I hope that you find that useful. I'll share my disclosures really quick. So I have ownership interest in Speechy Side Up LLC and Tassel Learning LLC. How about you, Elise?
I have ownership interest in the Therapist Support Network LLC, and I'm a member of ASHA.
Great. All right, so let's dive right in. Why are so many school-based SLPs feeling burned out right now? And this is not a new thing. This has been going on for a long time.
Yeah. And looking at the studies that they've done, it's so complex, right? Because I think that anyone listening to this might say the automatic thing that comes to our brain, which is caseload numbers. And I don't think that that's wrong, but I do think some states are addressing it with caseload caps, and we're seeing some benefits, but there's still that report of burnout. And so I don't think we have a concrete answer yet, at least in the studies that I read. And there's no concrete answer, but there's a lot pointing to autonomy and effectiveness. So autonomy, little control over your setting, over your caseload, and over your workload. And I think even when you unpack that more, like if anyone's listening to this, if you have tried to use the workload calculator out there that is in existence by ASHA, I mean, I think it's great that we're having those conversations. It is so hard. It is so hard to gauge workload off of a caseload. And I it's a difficult science. And so I do believe that that's contributing to burnout is the fact that it's hard to find the correlation between caseload and workload. I have seen caseloads of 62 that haven't had much case management requirements. They've been low minutes because many of them are transitioning out of services. And it's been completely manageable. And then on the flip side, you see caseloads of 30 that just are very taxing on the professional. And so I think one tangible thing that we can look at is, of course, caseload and workload for school-based providers. That's a tangible. But something else, and I put the quote here from one of the studies that I put at the end, but results indicated that SLPs in the school setting are feeling ineffective and overextended. And I think that effectiveness is something that is worth leaning into. And at this point, I'm giving my opinion, right? That because to me, that made me lean in. Because I do think that there are times in the school-based setting when you look at the minutes that you are given to see a student, and then you get a group that is very large, it can be very difficult to feel like what you are doing is making an impact. And who wants to go and do something that doesn't feel impactful? Now, I will say my son and my daughter both had school-based speech therapy. And for anyone listening, they would not work with me at all, either of them. So like, I get it, but no, they would not work with me. I could not help them. They were both the K too. Like I'm good with the K, but I digress. As a mom, I saw the impact that school SLP had, and I appreciated it so much. But I think as providers, when you're in it and you have so many students and you are so limited on time, it's really easy to feel ineffective. And that can contribute to that burnout feeling, to that numb feeling, to that, what am I even doing? This is my time away from my life and I'm not even making a difference. Like that sort of feeling that I think is contributing to what is going on and what's been going on in the school-based setting.
Makes a lot of sense. And it's difficult, right? Because these are some things that you can't fix, or it's a more like an individual case by case basis.
Yeah.
I've been so fascinated lately because I hired an SLP, and I'm very fascinated by the emotional side of the job. Like, you can have one client who feels very, very difficult, and you're spending a lot of energy, and maybe it's just not a good match, but that one client can make you wonder if this is the right path for you, if you should be in this field. And like you were saying, there are people that have 30 kids on their caseload and they don't feel overwhelmed or burned out. Maybe those children are a better match for that clinician. So the lack of autonomy, the lack of purpose is really straining on SLPs and a very difficult problem to fix. But I know you're going to tell us how school contracting can be really helpful in doing so. So, what makes school contracting feel different for some clinicians?
Yeah. So the first one is speaking to that autonomy. So when you are a contract provider and your relationship with the school is purely contractual in nature, it is a business to business relationship, even though schools aren't really a business. That's what we categorize it as, right? You are contracting with them to fill the needs. You should, if the contract is done how it's supposed to be done, you should have the ball in your court regarding your caseload size, your schedule, and service delivery. Now, let me say, you don't have the ball in your court regarding compliance. Like, those are, we legally, Missouri tells me what I have to do to qualify students on the caseload. I can't change that. Like, I can't give my students the minutes that I would just love to give them because that's not school-based service provision. So when I say service delivery, I'm not meaning that because that's a governing body. That's a law. We can't, as contractors, we also have an obligation to adhere to that. But when I talk about service delivery, I'm speaking more about group sizes. Like when I do virtual services, my groups, I say that groups of 3 are allowed with written consent from me, but my groups are 2 or less because I have had virtual groups of 4 before and virtual groups of 5 before, and I did not feel effective. So you have that autonomy, that contractual autonomy to say, my caseload size is not over this many, or I will see up to this many hours of services a week. For me, I always talk about Fridays. I needed Fridays off. That actually has changed to Tuesdays off, but I needed a day off for my life. And so having that control of your schedule, that was really hard to find when I was looking at school-based employee jobs, was a job where I wouldn't have to work every day of the week. And so that was something, that autonomy was so powerful. So first is autonomy. And we just talked about how there is that little control that you get when you are in an employment type setting. And the next is your ability to choose schools or contracts that align with values. So leaning into that effectiveness, because when I was thinking about all of this, I was like, man, how do you make school-based providers feel effective? Because so much of what we are battling is out of our control. These are state guidelines that are dictated often by federal. And so, like, we have so many layers, and that can make us feel so ineffective because we are constrained. But one thing that we can control as a contractor is you can choose the schools or contracts that feel fulfilling to you. So with me, I have always had this spot in my heart for super rural districts. Like, I once provided services for a school where the special education director was also the bus driver. And like everyone knew everyone. I mean, it was your most small town. I mean, K through 12 all in one building. Like it was amazing. That sort of stuff just fulfills me. I love that population. I love that close-knit community. And I feel more fulfilled serving a caseload like that than, going to, honestly, my hometown school where there's a lot of schools in our district. And so I I think your ability to choose contracts that feel valuable, whether it's with AAC or bilingual or, going back to your hometown or just doing something that feels meaningful to you can help. And that's where contracting comes in because you can be very intentional with the type of schools that you offer to contract with. You also can have clearer boundaries around your scope of work and availability. If you've followed me in other places, I'm a really big advocate for outlining your services contractually. I mean, I put in there, like, if I have to do paperwork, which I do, I mean, it's school-based, but paperwork is a billable service. And so if I decide to do progress reporting in the evening, I am billing for that. That's my boundary. I'm not taking my computer home and working for free. I bill. And so having those boundaries is really powerful when it comes back to kind of like regaining your provider power. And I also put on here, and this is a blessing and a curse with contracting. It depends how you look at it. Most of us see it as a blessing. The beauty of a contract is it's typically an easier out in regards to this isn't a fit, and your contract will have kind of your out terms, like a 30-day notice or whatever. But I know many of our states are really, really penalizing employees for leaving early. And with contracts, we don't have as much of that. If anything, some of our states really like short-term contracts. They don't want whole year contracts. This is big in Ohio, they want like maternity leave contracts or FMLA contracts. They don't want a whole 9-month thing. So with contracts, you also can do shorter spans. So if you're someone that you're like, I really like things for 8 weeks, and then that's when my burnout kicks in, that might be a path for you.
Those are all really great points. And I love the idea of finding a contract that aligns with your values or what lights your heart up. And I'm one of those people that likes short term and then let's move on, or we can reconvene, or let's take a break. I'm definitely one of those SLPs for sure. But that's really nice that you like to help those rural areas. That's really great.
Yeah, it's a whole vibe. I should write a book on it one day. I love rural contracts. Those are some of my favorites. So.
That's awesome. So, how can school contracting help SLPs reconnect with the parts of the job they originally felt passionate about? You touched a little bit on this in the last one.
Yeah. So I think really creating space to actually do the work. When I was writing this down and thinking on it, I put that and really reflected on it, on what I meant. Because I think often when we get in burnout situations, we aren't allowed to do our work. And that's so much of the problems. Like when I do coaching calls with people and I talk to them, very rarely do I hear people say, and surprising because you'd think this is what I'd hear. Very rarely do I hear people say, I don't like being an SLP. I actually don't hear that much at all. It's the other stuff like the bus duty and the lunch duty when you have all of these progress reports and the politics, which I'm not going to tell you that like being a contractor keeps you out of school drama. It doesn't, but you are buffered. You are, you like hear it and then you walk away. You're not in it like when you're an employee for the most part, but you really have this space to actually do your job. And you wouldn't think that that needs to be addressed, but it does in school-based scenarios. It can get noisy. It can get so noisy and you can forget why you're even there or what your degree actually, what your degree is and what your skills are. So I really like how contracting can create a space that's like, this is my work. And you list it. Like I said a minute ago, I am a big, like, list your services on your contract person. That there's something very therapeutic about listing, like, this is, related services as defined as this. Like, these are my services. So there's something really powerful about just being in a situation where you are just doing the job that you were trying to do. The next bullet point, allowing clinicians to focus on services and student impact. This is slightly redundant, but really want to drive it home. Focusing on services and that student impact can help combat that feeling of ineffectiveness, right? If you are there, and typically when schools contract, they want you there to provide the services and then they want you out. They don't typically want you at unnecessary trainings. They don't want you doing lunch duty, whatever. They want you in and then they want you out because you are a contracted provider. And so I feel like it's a much more focused school-based role. Restoring professional autonomy, I think I've discovered in my life how powerful autonomy is. And having that say of, these are my boundaries as a business owner. And I remember being in grad school and hearing about private practice and thinking like, yeah, that would be great. I want autonomy. And I actually thought about opening before I started working for the agency that I did. I was in skilled nursing and I knew I needed something different. I wanted school based because I wanted my summers off. And I was like, well, maybe I open a private practice so then I can have say on when I work. But I quickly realized summers off with a pediatric private practice probably wouldn't work super well for me and like working during the day. Back then, I didn't realize I could contract with schools as a provider. And so, of course, I went the agency route just to find a school-based role that was more flexible. So I think I've always known that I was going to want autonomy. I just didn't realize that I had what it took to get there. But I think professional autonomy is just huge in job satisfaction. And my next point, creating clearer boundaries such as rate. This is probably the thing I hear the most in as a coach and as a consultant is like, well, what do you charge? How much more do you make? What what does this look like financially? So this is a huge topic, which I can't believe I'm just now hitting on. I think we are obviously not happy with our pay in the majority of our states with school-based employee pay. I know that I would not be able to do a school-based employee role in Missouri. That would be a pay cut for my family. And so this allows you to have some boundaries with your rate that you obviously don't get as an employee. So you can charge what feels like a rate that reflects your value. And then the last bullet point that I put here, looking at kind of reconnecting with things that bring you passion, it just contracting makes it easier to say yes to work that aligns with your strengths and interests or your business mission. So thinking on private practice, you have a mission statement most likely or a reason you started your business. You can find contracts that align with that. So this can be an extension of your business mission and that that can be so rewarding because you expand your impact and you expand the mission and the reason why you started this in a different way. So that can kind of help if you're someone that's like, oh, I've been in private practice for 4 years, I'm burning out, I am tired, give me something different. This could be a way to add different, but still also the same because it's just an extension of the mission and the reason you started your business.
I love that. So you keep going back to autonomy as being a really big driving factor for, you know, or reaching burnout if you don't have autonomy, but then like doing school contracting so that you can have autonomy. What are the pieces of autonomy that are most important to SLPs? I think you mentioned like setting boundaries, but I don't know if we're going to touch on this and what the research says or if you wanted to kind of cover that now, but I just want to, I think it's like it's a buzzword, but like what does that actually mean or what does it look like?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I'm happy to unpack it. So I think first, let's look at schedule autonomy. Having control over saying when you are on and when you are off, right? And so there's autonomy of your time. Rate is another example of how we claim autonomy. So with many of our states, school-based SLPs are on the teacher pay scale. I do think most states are trying to change that, but we are on the teacher pay scale. And so rate's a huge topic. That was a big thing for me when I left SNF. I was like, I can't go down to that salary. So having autonomy over determining your rate, having autonomy saying, this is how I spend my time and this is what I won't do. Examples of this are like supervision only contracts where you supervise and you do evaluations, but you might be someone that you're like, I'm not doing direct treatment. I've seen the flip where people are like, I just want to do direct treatment. Do not give me paperwork. And they'll get contracts that are with schools that are larger and have an assessment team, but they don't have enough providers to provide services. So it's samples like that, like autonomy over your time, autonomy over your funds.
Role.
Yeah, yeah. Autonomy over the type of students that you will serve. Being very candid with the school prior to contract. I am looking for my business serves students ages first grade through third grade. And the more that you just to, be candid, the more that you narrow it down, the harder it will be to find a contract. I'm not going to say you're going to make your one call and be like, I'm going to work with fifth grade. I'm going to charge $120 an hour. And I'm like, you'll have to work hard the more narrow we are. But it's out there. It is out there. So really dictating how you spend your time and your day in a goal to address burnout by keeping your workload at bay and by keeping you feeling effective.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for breaking that down a little bit, because I think if someone's looking at like, oh, I'm feeling really burnt out. Okay, that's why I don't have autonomy over my rate. I don't have autonomy over my time. I don't have autonomy over my caseload types. I would love to see a research study that looks at which one of those are more important to most SLPs and how schools could address that, because yeah, the caseload workload calculator thing is not working.
No, and you know what's interesting, and this isn't a study I found, this is just a trend I've observed, the provider virtual trend. Have you seen this
No, tell
or
me more.
experienced this? So providers like recruiting right now for virtual companies is so much easier than for recruiting in person.
Mhm.
And so I too would love to see, and actually, there's probably, if I dig harder, there's probably something, I imagine, maybe not to speech therapists, but maybe there's more in there on why remote work feels. Does it feel less overwhelming? Does it feel,
Less micromanaging.
yeah, because that's something that I've worked with some businesses on that are recruiting for in person, and my businesses that I coach that are recruiting for virtual, typically they only have a hard time recruiting if it's like a niche thing, if they're trying to find a bilingual provider. That's another thing. And I'm getting a lot of that as a coach. Like, I want to start a virtual school staffing agency. And so I think there's something there too about going to a place. And I mean, I don't know if we're like, can we just build studies now?
I
This is
know,
this is future. Can you run with all of this?
right?
But you're
No, I'd like to know like how long SLPs stay in virtual too, because I've done it all. I've done the school base, I've done the virtual, and it seems like really appealing, but everyone that I speak to that's done virtual, it doesn't last long. Because imagine seeing that same caseload virtually, sitting at a
Yeah.
computer all day. Yeah, it's not really sustainable, but I would love, there's no research up, but I would love to see like that.
Oh, for sure, for sure. For me, I missed being able to turn work off because
Uh-huh.
my work was at my house. That
Yeah.
was what I struggled with as a as like a in the virtual space was my work being at my house, which
Yeah.
was like the thing that appealed to me. Another thing I'm curious about that it just came to me as we were speaking, so I didn't look, but because we are a predominantly female field, does that contribute to our burnout? Is our overall mental load higher? I don't know. I don't know. I just would love to. I think there's so much to talk about with this topic.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
I do think one thing that I feel so confident in is that contracting has addressed some of the autonomy, lack of control, feeling, lack of effectiveness that we get from being a school-based provider.
yeah, that makes sense. I mean, listen, every job has its cons,
Yeah.
right? So if you really want to be in a school setting for the hours, for the summers off, you know, then this is a really great way to do that, but bring back that autonomy so you're not miserable.
Yeah.
So, what does it look like to use school contracting as a side gig for a private practice rather than just adding more work to your plate? And I guess also, would you recommend that someone have an established private practice, or could this be the private practice?
This could be the private practice. It really, I seen it either way. Last I polled my the Facebook group that I'll tell you about at the end of this. Last time I polled this, we were about 50-50. 50% had private clients or a private practice, and the other 50% were strictly contracting. So it really depends on if you want that work, if you want the variety, if you want work year round, because contracts are very seasonal, but adding it to your plate. So, if you have an existing private practice or you started a business, how can you add this in as a side gig? So first, be intentional about which contracts you take on. It becomes really obvious. And just so everyone listening knows, like, you don't engage in a conversation and immediately give them a contract and then you're in a contract. Because this is a business to business model, it tends to be a pretty long process, right? Like, we first talk to them, oh, they're open to contracting. And then we meet with them and ask them questions. And then we talk about our business. And then we do contracts. So you have time to learn about your school the majority of the time, which is important. Unless, well, I'm just going to give the caveat because I am speaking to someone who's in Florida. RFPs are very different. So I won't
We
take
can talk a
anyone.
little bit about my experience at the end of this.
That's where I was like, I was saying it. I was like, I need to give this disclaimer right now. For anyone who doesn't know what that is, I have a podcast episode on it. It's a long topic, but for the most part, being intentional about which contracts you take on. There are schools that will give you red flags that they are going to require a lot of you. So, really having it established before you get too far into this as to what would serve your business. Use contract terms, have a contract that creates predictable daytime revenue and not nights and weekends, which means protecting your workload, right? Protecting what you take on. Don't take on a full-time contract if you only have 2 days a week. And then structure your contracts with clear boundaries around your hours and, the scope of services you'll be providing, especially if you're someone that you're going in and you're providing bilingual services. I would get that in a contractual relationship if you don't want to do something besides that. Because typically once schools have someone, they're like, hey, while we have you, we got like 2 kids that need evaluated right now and nobody has time. So setting that contractually can really, really help you keep your boundaries. And then treat the contract, if you have a private practice, treat the contract as a branch of your business, right? So it is its own branch. It's almost like you're at the top and you have your private practice and you have your school contract. The reason I say that is they are different. And it is important to recognize that. So if you're like, oh, I have a private practice set up, I have all the forms, I have this software, that is amazing. I'm so happy. But a lot of that doesn't translate over to school contracting. So just be prepared for a learning curve when you first start. And then leverage school contracts to stabilize cash flow, grabbing contracts and staffing them out. That can help serve as a cash flow line to your private practice that typically has busier times that differ from, if you're in a pediatric private practice, that differ from your busy times with your clinic, right? Because school contracts, for the most part, don't offer services in the summer. And if they do, it's extended school year and it's really minimal. So You can leverage school contracts to stabilize cash flow, but again, keep your capacity in mind with that and be intentional about what you take. If you're like, I don't know anything about schools, be intentional about who you hire to staff those contracts.
Thank you for explaining all of that. Yeah. So I have a private practice. I was looking into school contracting as a side gig, and Elise was so helpful, and everything happened like really fast. Like I was looking at part-time work in my county, and I was appalled by how many open positions there were. And this was like December. I mean, I'm telling you, it was like 70 schools had open positions. And so I met with them and they were going to hire me, but then I like spoke to Elise and then asked them if they were interested in school contracting. And they sent me a list of schools that they would be willing to work with me on. They basically said, if you can find or if you'll take any of these positions, we'll work with you. But as Elise mentioned, like you really want to look into those schools and make sure it's a good fit. So when I looked at them, every single one of them, it's no wonder they were having a hard time filling. I mean, they were really far from me. So this would have been like a 45-minute drive to get to those schools. Tried to work on hiring somebody that lived closer to the schools and it ended up falling through, but I feel like it was a very good exercise for me. And just with the caveat that I am in Florida and it's much more difficult in Florida for whatever reason. I'm sure you talk about this in that podcast episode, right, Elise?
Yes, yes. Florida uses a process that caters to agencies. And so it can be very difficult to get in. But I will say Florida really likes in person. And so provider run businesses usually will thrive if they can find someone in person.
That
But
makes sense. Yeah.
it's
I
a
mean, I worked on the other side, like as a AT specialist, and I agree with that because we had a shortage of SLPs and they pulled us. They didn't really pull us. We still had to do our stiff tech job and go to a school setting. They would not go the virtual route. It was wild. And we had full-time jobs already. But yeah, I think that I'm not done. I'm going to look into private schools or revisit it again, but I see a tide shifting too because it is so bad here with the amount of SLPs who are leaving the schools and the positions that they're not able to fill.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and with private schools too, because Florida, you guys have vouchers now, right?
For some, yeah, not all
Okay,
the schools,
okay.
but yeah.
So Texas has got, well, I think they're starting vouchers in 26, 27. So I do think that not only the public schools have, you know, we have providers leaving, et cetera, but now there's some new things around private schools. And so you mentioned the word exercise, and I was like, yeah, I feel like every single contract I've been a part of has been a great exercise.
Right.
They're all so unique.
Yeah. And, for some people, contracting this is their full time gig. This was
Mhm.
a side gig for me, and I had other things going on. So I'm like, let me put a pause on this. But I learned so much about the process. And I feel like every experience is a learning opportunity. And Elise was so, so helpful through it, the entire thing.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, for an SLP who feels stuck, what is a realistic first step to explore school contracting?
Yeah. So the first thing I put on here, I wanted to sit and chat about. I try to always include it in anything I'm doing. And this felt like the best place for it. But learn the differences between employment and contracting so you know what you're opting into. So I mentioned autonomy, but I will say if you're someone who needs stability, and not that contracting is unstable, there's like you just shared, that school had so many openings, but contracting it's a business. You are owning a business and there are so many high highs and there are low lows and there's invoicing delays and there is health insurance and costs of health insurance if you have to provide that yourself. There are considerations to take. And although contracting is, it really saved me from going and working at our local spa. We have a spa and I was in there getting a massage, and I had this moment where I was like, "I could work here."
I've done that at a cafe.
Right, right. I actually think I saw someone in one of the Facebook groups put that they were in Costco and they were just like, I could give out the samples. Like this doesn't look bad. And so for me, I don't know if I would be an SLP if I went the employment route. One, that we couldn't have sustained on that income. But I also had my husband's health insurance. And so I just like to be really, really candid about that because it's easy for me to sit here and talk about how amazing contracting is to get the autonomy. But I know that we all have our own journeys right now. And so I really encourage everyone to know the differences between employment and contracting and look into health insurance costs and things like that as you make those considerations. So you know what you're opting into. Really lean into what motivates you, whether it's I will be paid less if I am paid the same every month. That's what my family needs versus I'm going to go on a limb. I'm going to get paid more, but like I'm going to have to sell. I'm going to have to get that contract. So really look into that as you're making those decisions. Look into the differences between employment and contracting. So you absolutely know the right path. And then if you're already a private practice, I just think it's such a great add-on for you. So know that. Also, another thing to do as you're in these like first steps, identify the schools you'd want to work with and the service you'd want to provide. I really advocate for doing this before you reach out to schools because when we are in a situation where we're like, I just want a school contract, we will say yes to anything. And so I highly recommend really creating your dream school before you call. So when you do get that school and they say, just like they said to you, like, if you could staff these, I mean, we're down, we'll start tomorrow. And I'm so glad that you sat back and you analyzed them because I've seen people like, sure, I'll staff all of them.
Yeah, well, I
And
think you were helpful in that process because I explained the issue and like why I wasn't totally jumping on the opportunity. And part of me was like, do I just say yes so I can get in because of this RFP process? But then it wasn't worth it. Like I would have burned out within the first week. And at this stage of my career, how many years in, 12 years in now, it's I can see the big picture and where the trajectory goes, and I didn't wanna end up there, you know?
yeah, yeah, no. And that is so important. And I think that's something that, we all have to do. We all have to sit with. Not every contract should lead to a yes. And so identify the type of schools you'd want to work with and the service you'd want to provide and start relationship building. I mentioned a little bit ago, the school sales process is slow. It is slow. Florida's weird. Texas is weird. There are those RFP states that are different. But for the majority of us, it takes a while to really get a school to consider you for a contract because first they're looking at employment and seeing if they can bring on an employee. And then they're responding to all the agencies that have salespeople that, I mean, we think we're getting phone calls from these agencies, these poor sped directors, and text messages and emails. And so it takes a while to get in there. But I will say, trust based, I mean, we are, what's it called? Have you seen the stuff on like we're in a trust deficit? I think
No.
it's anecdotal in nature. Like, I don't think that's like an evidence-based thing, but there's a lot of marketing anecdotes out there that say we're in a trust deficit. And because we're oversold to as a population and because you introduce new technology, so none of us really know, are we seeing something that's real or like, is this AI? Because of that, there's been a trust deficit. And so that's why especially last year, a lot of industries, school contracting was one of them, experienced a disruption in the sales process. So, like my customers, their contracts came in very differently last year from years prior. And so, all of that to say is we're seeing trust sells, relationship sells. And schools are really leading into do we know that this person is going to show up and provide the service? So, because of that, I put this on here really early. It doesn't matter if you are listening to this and it is February and you are considering next school year, 26-27 school year, go ahead and introduce yourself to the local SLP introduce yourself as a local SLP or private practice owner and resource to the school decision maker, which the majority of the time is a special education director or whatever your state calls it, your state equivalent. That is typically who you want to reach out to. And you let them know that you own a business, let them know that you support districts that have a difficult time recruiting, and you're early, but you're here. So the three big things: know what you're opting into before you opt into it. 2, identify the route you want your business to take, what sort of contracts you want your business to take. And 3, go ahead and put yourself out there, start relationship building. This is a long process. Sometimes it takes 5 emails to get through to anyone. So definitely take time. I'm trying to remember, was yours? You already had a relationship with them, right?
We had a mutual friend that
Okay.
had a good relationship with the director, and they connected us.
Was it email?
It
Do you
was all
remember?
email.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's like the best way. The best way is because there's that trust factor. Like someone I trust is connecting me. So
Mhm.
therefore I can trust this person. And that's such a good way to get in.
Yeah. Well, and it ended abruptly, so something happened with trust at some point, and it seemed like on their end there was a lack of trust, but I don't know what happened, but
Mm,
it's okay.
yeah. Yeah.
Wasn't meant to be for me at that time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and it happened so fast. Like everything snowballed very, very quickly. So it was like kind of a crash course in school contracting.
Yeah, that's a doozy of a first contractual conversation process.
Yeah. Like here, yeah, if you can fill these, we'll give it to you. And we'll ignore the RFP process basically.
Right? I know there's so many people listening that are probably like, I wonder if she'll share who that is.
They probably know exactly who it is if they've ever dealt with Florida.
That
And
is
they know where I live.
right.
I'm pretty candid about it. Oh, amazing. Well, I know people are either going to pick back up with you if they've already kind of looked into some of your work before, or if they're totally ready to dive into school contracting, they're going to want to connect with you. So, where is the best place to connect with you? I guess let's start with your resources and then we can get into your contact info.
Yeah. So my resources, I do have a free checklist for getting started on my website, therapistsupportnetwork.com. It's a basic checklist. It's not going to like give you every possible answer, but at least help you organize your thoughts. Hold close though, those first 3 things that I just told you a minute ago. Follow my podcast or no, subscribe. You subscribe to a podcast,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm new to this. I'm new to this. Subscribe to my podcast, Beyond the Big Agencies. That is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, basically every podcast streaming platform, I believe. I am the admin of a Facebook group called SLP, OT, and PT School Contractors. This is a really good space to start learning. This also is good if you're listening to this and you're like, I don't want to tackle sales and contracting, but I don't want to work for schools. Provider run businesses do I post a recruitment thread in there once every few weeks, and you will find provider run businesses who are hiring. And so you can work for a business that is not an investor run agency. So I recommend that group, even if you're looking to work for someone else. And then my website has all of my trainings, tools, coaching information, and that is therapistsupportnetwork.com.
Amazing. I actually just referred a friend to your Facebook group the other day. And then when you posted the recruitment post that you just did, I shared that with her as well.
Yeah.
She's been in a school for a very long time and she's like, I'm ready. I'm done.
She's
I'm like, wow, that took you
ready.
long enough.
So it's interesting if there's anyone, well, I mean, I feel like you're one of the OGs of the group. I used to have it to where people could post their job vacancies,
Uh-huh.
but there's so many provider run businesses out there now that it was like bogging down the feed and people couldn't get their questions through. And so I changed it to where there's a thread now. And I was like, this is such a beautiful milestone because we have so many businesses now that are helping redefine the space. And there's still work to be done because we're getting all the spammy phone calls. But that was a really rewarding milestone. It was bittersweet.
No, it's nice. It's very organized. I think my suggestion would be to add the city. Because when I shared it with my friend, I was like, Florida's very large. So I know some of the positions are virtual, but like we had just agreed on Florida likes like in person mostly. So
Yeah.
this might be a Florida specific type of request.
Oh, no, no. There's a
No.
lot of states that are being really ornery with virtual right now. I always say that pendulum swings.
Yeah.
I've seen it to where virtual's like been it really depends on whatever's going on compliance wise. And
Mhm.
I found, but yeah. Yeah, right now virtual schools are grumbly about it in
Is
many
that
states.
because like sometimes the request is for like a support personnel? Like what's the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, I think so. I think in some states it's been related to advocacy. Like this is me assuming with California, it's been related to advocacy, but with our other states, it is getting the facilitator. And so I have found though, once the people that I coach get in, renewals are usually easier because schools then are like, I know who you are. I know what I have. We know how to do this. And so it's that first contract. And yes, a lot of the pushback is we have to have a person on site.
Gotcha. Okay. And all like the equipment that goes with it too.
Yeah, that one was more of a pushback pre COVID from what I've seen. I feel like post COVID schools they've got it down more
No more
than they
excuses.
used. Yeah, yeah. I used to have to like pre COVID, we'd have to like direct connect via like an Ethernet cord the Chromebook to like a school thing because we were just trying to get the internet to be fast enough. And
Yeah.
then on days where like the school was doing, and granted, I work with rural schools, the days where schools were doing like testing, I couldn't do virtual services because it would suck up all the internet. Like, I feel like post COVID, that part has gotten a little bit better, but the facilitator it's been a beast.
Okay, good to know. So, here are some of the references that we discussed today. We like to include this quality of the study chart adapted from Donahue and Cox. But in regards to the articles that you've included, because I like briefly reviewed them, they're these would be difficult to actually put in like a randomized control study. And if you don't have a randomized control study, then you can't have like these higher levels. So I wouldn't discount these at all. And actually, two of them seem to be open access, or at least like if you're an ASHA member, you have access to them. And Kelly Carson is amazing. And if she's putting her name on it, then, I would definitely look into it. But did you want to talk about these articles a little bit that you shared?
Yeah. For me, I was looking specific to information on burnout. And I do think specific to what happened, or I think I saw a trend in studies that were done around the COVID era. And it seems like we need some updated studies post COVID, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. And like two of these for Corson is on, but I was also looking and it is so limited.
Hmm.
It's like they don't care about SLPs and their burnout, basically.
I know, I know. I was struggling. And I did find some that was like, I don't think I put it on here, but there was some that was like a school based versus medical based.
Mhm.
But yeah, it is. I know. And also, if anyone has a higher study, I would love to see it.
I didn't see. I
You did it.
looked.
Okay.
Mhm. I did. I
I was
looked.
like, could this be me?
No, I looked because I would have included it. There was one literature review, but it wasn't specific to school-based SLPs. It was just burnout amongst SLPs, and it wasn't a randomized control studies. So you're kind of looking at level 3 again for something like that. But like I said, you don't need to in this case because these are more just like informative. They're basically taking like surveys from SLPs to kind of figure out like what is contributing to their stress and burnout. To actually do a study on that would probably be unethical to purposefully expose SLPs to
Poor
stress
thing.
and
Yeah, no.
burnout. um,
Yes, that is a good point. I did think it was the top one. I did think it was interesting because I was looking at my notes that I was taking when I was collecting this all, that it mentioned because it was during the pandemic, I guess the data confirmed that when systems are stressed as a whole, and on top of that, I think we can assume the individuals taking the study were stressed because of the pandemic as well, that amplified things.
that's
And
so
so,
interesting.
yeah, yeah. And so I think that also could speak to this last year. I think, schools, many of our states had changes happen. Texas had funding cuts. And because of that, that can really impact stress as well.
That's really, really interesting. Yeah, one of the classes that I'm taking right now is on operations management. And basically, what they're saying is that if there's problems in an organization, it's never the individual, it's always the system. And so, what you're saying just like really aligns with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that one was really interesting to me, and I hope to see more. I do. I'll just put it in the universe. Someone go study
Yeah,
this.
yeah, right. Awesome. Okay, so let's go here. So, where can everybody find and connect with you?
Yeah, my website is www.thetherapistSupportNetwork.com. Find me on Instagram. I love Instagram, The Therapist Support Network. I'm trying to post more about me on there. So gardening, farm
I like
life.
that.
Yeah. Come join me there. And then my email is Elise at thetherapistsupportnetwork.com.
Amazing. And do you have a new program that just came out that I saw today? Is that new?
So it's not new. It's a year and a half, but I take cohorts. It is my only
Okay.
cohort program. And that is the one, it is my newest program. It is the one that is for established contractors who are in that spot. It actually just made me think of it a minute ago with your comment on organizations who have established a business, who have providers serving schools, but they don't have the systems to back it. So I've always found once you get a few providers on, your business starts to show cracks because you desperately need systems. So that's my Scale Your School contract business. And we have enough provider run businesses out there now that we can have that sort of cohort support. So that's really exciting.
That's amazing. How many people were in your last cohort?
I
Your-
only take 15
Okay.
because I am the sole coach and it is very hands-on. So I get to know these businesses very well. So I cap it at 15.
So you could definitely study that because I feel like your intervention is the coaching. And what would you measure?
Ooh.
Like, would you measure like growth in the business or the satisfaction or the improvement of the systems? I'm just like, you could go so many different
Yeah,
ways with that.
I could. On like first blush, I think I would measure systems, the system implementation and turnaround time. So like time to onboard a school, time to do this. That would be a huge thing to study. Time spent selling, like I would love to study how much time went down, but also satisfaction as a business owner.
I love that. Yeah, there's like so many different dependent variables that you could have.
You have such a research brain.
Now I do. This is prior. You've spoken to me prior to being in school. It has completely changed. But you know what? It's important, right? Like our field needs this information to build off of and move forward.
Yeah.
So are you
Yeah.
going to do a cohort with like newer contractors or are you just sticking with like the scaling your contracting business right now?
I think eventually I will, and you and I have talked about that.
Mhm.
I think I will at some point. I am very involved with my business. And so I think I need to let some things go before I start taking, because I mean, I'm very involved in coaching and yeah. So I do. I think that's coming once I ease up my day to day.
That makes sense. Well, yeah, exactly. So you don't have the cohort, but at least you have the one-on-one coaching for that, for anybody that needs it right now.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
I'm sure people who are not even in contracting yet have all of our original questions that we had the first time that you and I spoke. So we do have another episode with Elise. And like she mentioned, she has her podcast, Beyond the Big Agencies, right?
Yeah.
I would definitely recommend going there because if you have questions about how to set your rate, how to reach out to a school, how to, find the SPED directors, what's the best way to contact them? I'm thinking of all the questions like we had last time. Any
Yeah.
other questions that you tend to get?
What should I charge?
Yes. How do I hire?
Yeah. Yeah.
What should it say in my contract?
Yes.
All of
Yes.
those things.
How do I get started?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely recommend listening to those two sources and then also checking out your website because you have templates as well. And I have purchased your hiring template before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Elise, thank you so, so much. You are just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to school contracting and such a support for, I'll say therapists, not just SLPs. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
It's always a pleasure.